June 1944, in the quiet French village of Oradour-sur-Glane, the sound of engines shattered the stillness. By nightfall, 642 men, women, and children were dead, burned alive in a church, shot in barns, left in the streets. The killers wore black uniforms marked with silver skulls and twin lightning bolts. They were the Waffen-SS, the paramilitary wing of Hitler's regime, feared across Europe. At their peak, the Waffen-SS numbered nearly 1 million. They fought on every front, from the frozen steppes of Russia to the beaches of Normandy. Their reputation mixed ferocity with atrocity, their presence synonymous with terror, yet they had begun humbly, in obscurity. In 1925, the Nazi Party was little more than a fringe movement in Munich. Its enemies were rival political groups, hostile newspapers, and the police. To protect himself, Hitler gathered a small guard, just 100 men at first. They wore no special uniforms, their job only to stand close at rallies, shield him from attack, and project discipline. No one could have foreseen what they would become. The turning point came in 1929, when Heinrich Himmler took command. Himmler seemed unlikely as a leader. No medals, no war heroics, no charisma. Before politics, he had managed a chicken farm, but his obsession with bloodlines, order, and breeding foreshadowed what he would build. He envisioned his guard not merely as soldiers, but as a sacred brotherhood. He studied Nordic myths, Germanic runes, and racial pseudoscience. From this strange mixture of fantasy and ideology, he crafted the foundations of the SS. When Hitler became chancellor in 1933, Himmler seized his chance. His small guard became an independent organization, loyal only to the Nazi leadership. Recruitment swelled, but acceptance was strict. Applicants had to be tall, blonde, healthy, and disciplined. Yet bloodlines were only the beginning. Himmler wanted not just strong bodies, but fanatical minds. Dachau became his first forge. Long before it was infamous as a concentration camp, Dachau served as the SS's training ground. Here, recruits were broken down and remade. Days began before dawn and stretched past midnight. Endless marching, drills in freezing rain, beatings for hesitation, obstacle courses run under live fire. Weakness meant humiliation or dismissal. Sleep was scarce, food meager. Exhaustion was constant, but physical brutality was only half the process. Indoctrination filled every spare hour. Recruits sat through lectures on racial science, propaganda films, and endless songs glorifying Hitler and sacrifice. Straw dummies marked as Jews or Bolsheviks were stabbed with bayonets until violence became reflex. When they swore their oath, it was not to Germany, but to Hitler personally, to serve without question, to kill without hesitation. For many, this oath sealed their fate. By 1939, the Waffen-SS had grown to 20,000 men. The Leibstandarte, Hitler's hand-picked guard, stood at the center, while the Totenkopf, or Death's Head, division drew its ranks from concentration camp staff. Himmler proclaimed that the SS would carve a new world from the ashes of the old, through fire and blood. What had begun as a small bodyguard unit was now an ideological army. Their first real test came in Poland. On September 1st, 1939, German forces surged across the frontier. The Wehrmacht brought tanks and planes, but the SS brought something else: terror. Their orders were not only to fight, but to destroy the educated and the defiant, to crush the nation's spirit. The town of Zwachew was one of the first targets. Over 200 civilians were slaughtered, homes burned with families inside. In other towns, priests were shot in front of their congregations. Teachers dragged into squares and executed. Entire communities disappeared in smoke and fire. Within a year, over 60,000 Polish clergy, teachers, and professionals had been eliminated. The SS had turned atrocity into a method. Even surrender brought no safety. In Warsaw, hospital wards full of patients were deliberately set on fire. Survivors recalled hearing screams until the roof collapsed. To Berlin, these crimes were not failures, but successes. Atrocity became proof of loyalty. In the West, the pattern repeated. During the 1940 invasion of France, the Leibstandarte moved at the spearhead. Their ferocity matched the Blitzkrieg, but so did their brutality. At Dunkirk, over 80 surrendered British and French prisoners were herded into a barn, grenades thrown inside, and survivors machine-gunned. Private Thomas Evans crawled out alive, remembering his captors laughing as they fired. No one was punished. Instead, the division was praised. By 1941, Hitler's gaze turned east. Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union, was framed not as conquest, but as annihilation. The Waffen-SS divisions spearheaded the advance. Behind them trailed the Einsatzgruppen, killing squads tasked with extermination. But the SS did not merely guard or assist. They often pulled the triggers themselves. At Babi Yar near Kiev, September 1941, over 33,000 Jews were shot in just 2 days. Waffen-SS units cordoned the area, herded victims into the ravine, and fired. Survivors recalled the gunfire echoing like thunder, bodies piling until the gorge itself seemed full of death. Across Belarus and Ukraine, entire villages were burned, barns set alight with families inside. And yet, the SS was not invincible. The brutal Russian winter, endless Soviet resistance, and catastrophic losses at Stalingrad drained their strength. Still, Himmler expanded. By 1943, the Waffen-SS numbered nearly 500,000. Foreign volunteers were added. Frenchmen, Ukrainians, Baltic recruits, even Bosnian Muslims. Himmler called it a crusade for Europe, though veterans derided the newcomers as weak. That summer, the SS faced their greatest battle at Kursk, the largest tank clash in history. Leibstandarte, Das Reich, and Totenkopf divisions spearheaded the assault. At Prokhorovka, tanks collided in waves, steel against steel, fire against fire. But Soviet reinforcements overwhelmed them. The offensive collapsed. From then on, the SS fought more often in retreat. Their reputation for atrocity, however, only deepened. In June 1944, 4 days after D-Day, the Das Reich division rolled into Oradour-sur-Glane. Men were shot in barns, women and children locked inside the church as grenades ignited flames. Only one woman, Marguerite Ruffenche, escaped by leaping from a window. By evening, the village was ash and silence. Meanwhile, in the east, the SS oversaw the machinery of genocide. Auschwitz became the most infamous of all, where nearly 500,000 Hungarian Jews were deported and gassed within weeks. Across Treblinka, Sobibor, and Majdanek, entire populations disappeared, their lives extinguished in what were essentially factories of death. The SS manned the camps, enforced order, and ensured the system ran efficiently. Even against enemy soldiers, they carried their fanaticism. In Normandy, the 12th SS Panzer Division, composed largely of Hitler Youth, captured Canadian troops. Instead of treating them as prisoners, they executed them. At least 156 were murdered in June 1944. 6 months later, during the Battle of the Bulge, SS men massacred 84 American prisoners at Malmedy, gunning them down in a snowy field. A few survived by hiding under the bodies of their comrades. By 1945, the SS fought to the bitter end. In Berlin, French SS volunteers of the Charlemagne Division defended the Reichstag itself, fighting Soviet tanks street by street. It was futile. Germany surrendered in May. The Waffen-SS lay in ruins, but defeat brought no redemption. Their legacy was sealed in atrocity. At Nuremberg, the SS was declared a criminal organization. Leaders like Sepp Dietrich faced trial. Evidence from Dachau, Buchenwald, and Auschwitz revealed starvation, torture, and industrialized killing. Yet many escaped justice. Adolf Eichmann fled to Argentina, living freely until captured in 1960. Klaus Barbie, the butcher of Lyon, hid in Bolivia for decades before his capture in 1983. For survivors, the scars never healed. Villages like Oradour remain preserved in ruins, silent reminders of what was destroyed. Survivors of Malmedy carried memories of comrades falling in snow. Across Europe, entire communities were erased. The Waffen-SS began as a bodyguard unit, a small circle of men around Hitler. It ended as one of the most infamous forces in history, an army of zealots who waged war not only on soldiers, but on civilians, on entire peoples. Their fanaticism gave them ruthless momentum, but also blinded them. They left behind ruins, mass graves, and a warning etched into the memory of the 20th century. They remind us how ordinary men, farmers, students, clerks, can be reshaped into executioners when stripped of individuality and consumed by ideology. They remind us how blind devotion and worship of power can turn a cause into a machine of destruction. And they remind us that history's darkest chapters can return if the world chooses not to see them coming.